The Vorthan warship was the size of a mountain. It hung in the sky above New York City, like a dark cloud that would never pass. People stood in the streets and looked up with fear in their eyes. Children held on to their parents. Dogs barked at the shadow that covered the sun. Inside the United Nations building, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity ever knew aliens existed. Now, he faced something far worse than any human enemy. The Vorthan delegation entered the room. They were massive creatures, standing over 8 feet tall. Their skin was like gray stone, and their eyes glowed with a pale yellow light. They wore armor made of a metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. The leader of the delegation was a general named Throck. He looked at the humans in the room the way a man might look at insects. Admiral Ben Carter stepped forward. He was an older man with white hair and a face that had seen too many battles. He spoke in a calm voice. "We welcome you to Earth. We hope we can find peace between our peoples." Throck made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was a harsh noise, like rocks grinding together. "Peace," he repeated. The word sounded strange in his mouth. "You do not understand why we are here, little creatures. We are not here to make peace. We are here to give you a choice. Surrender now, or be destroyed." The room went silent. Jake Morrison felt his hands become fists at his sides, but he did not move. Throck walked slowly around the room. He looked at the human leaders like they were animals in a cage. "We have watched your species for some time. You are soft. You are weak. You have no claws, no armor, no venom. Your bodies break so easily." He stopped in front of a young woman, Lieutenant Emma Walsh, who stood beside Jake. She did not look away from his glowing eyes. "Even your females are sent to war. How desperate you must be." Emma Walsh kept her face still. She was not tall, and her brown hair was pulled back in a simple tie. But there was something in her eyes that made Throck pause for just a moment. Admiral Carter spoke again. "We will not surrender. Earth is our home. We will defend it." Throck laughed again, and this time the other Vorthan soldiers joined him. The sound filled the room like thunder. "Defend it? With what?" "We have conquered 53 species across this galaxy. Races far stronger than you, far more advanced than you. They all fell before the Vorthan Empire. They all begged for mercy in the end." He leaned close to Admiral Carter. "Do you know who leads our empire? Warlord Kethson. He has not lost a battle in 200 of your years. He has killed more enemies with his own hands than your entire species has soldiers. When he learns of your refusal, he will come here himself, and he will enjoy watching your world burn." Jake Morrison finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. "Then let him come." The room went silent again. Throck turned to look at Jake. For a long moment, the alien general studied the human captain. Then he smiled, showing rows of teeth like broken glass. "You have courage," Throck said. "That is rare. But courage will not save you. Nothing will save you." He turned and walked toward the door. "You have one of your weeks to change your mind. After that, the fleet arrives. And everything you have ever built, everything you have ever loved, will become dust." The Vorthan delegation left. The mountain-sized ship rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars. That night, Warlord Kethsan received the report on his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He sat on a throne made from the bones of fallen enemies. He was even larger than his soldiers, nearly 10 feet tall. His body was covered in scars from 100 battles. His eyes burned with a fire that had never gone out. A hologram of Earth floated before him. Such a small world, such fragile creatures living on it. "They refuse to surrender," his advisor told him. "They say they will fight, Kefson was quiet for a moment. Then he began to laugh. It started low and grew until it echoed through the entire ship. His soldiers looked at each other and began to laugh as well. "They will fight," Kefson repeated. "These soft little animals with their weak bodies and their short lives. They will fight the Vorthan Empire." He shook his head slowly. "I have not been this amused in decades." He stood from his throne and walked to the viewing window. Stars stretched out before him like scattered diamonds. "Send a message to every corner of the galaxy," he commanded. "Let all species know what is about to happen. Let them watch as we crush these humans. Let it be a reminder of what happens to those who defy us." He turned back to his advisor. "And place a wager among the fleet. I want to know how long my soldiers think these humans will last. I say 3 days. No more," the advisor bowed. "And the main fleet, my lord?" Kefson waved his hand. "Send the advance force only. 20 ships will be more than enough for such a primitive species. I will not waste our full strength on creatures who do not deserve the honor." Back on Earth, Jake Morrison stood on the roof of a building and looked up at the stars. Emma Walsh found him there an hour later. "The president wants to see you," she said. "They are forming a defense council." Jake nodded, but did not look away from the sky. "They laughed at us, Emma. Did you see their faces? They think we are nothing." Emma stood beside him. "Maybe that is a good thing." Jake finally looked at her. "What do you mean?" "They are not afraid of us," Emma said. "They think this will be easy. That means they will make mistakes. And when they do, we will be ready." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, for the first time that day, he smiled. "You know, Lieutenant, you might be right. I usually am, sir." Jake laughed softly. It felt strange to laugh when the end of the world was coming. But somehow, it also felt right. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed them. They were still here, and they would not go quietly far across the galaxy. Other species watched their screens. They saw the Vorthan announcement. They saw the images of Earth and its people. Most of them shook their heads sadly. They had seen this story before. Another young species about to be crushed. Another world about to fall. But a few of them looked closer. They saw something in the eyes of the human leaders. Something they had not seen in a long time. Hope. And for the first time in centuries, they wondered if maybe, just maybe, things might be different this time. The Vorthan advance fleet came through the darkness of space like wolves hunting sheep. 20 warships, each one armed with enough weapons to destroy a continent. Commander Vrek stood on the bridge of the lead ship and watched the human solar system grow larger on his screen. He was bored. This mission was beneath him. "Sir, we are detecting human vessels near the asteroid belt," one of his officers reported. Vrek looked at the screen. 12 small ships. They were tiny compared to his warships. "How many?" he asked, though he had already counted them. 12, sir. They appear to be their entire defense fleet." Vrek made a sound of disgust. 12 ships against 20. And our ships are 10 times their size. He turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy them. I want this finished before the next meal." The Vorthan fleet moved forward. Their weapons powered up with a deep hum that vibrated through the ships. On the screens, the human vessels seemed to scatter like frightened animals. "They are running," the officer said. "Should we pursue?" "Of course," Vrek replied. "Hunt them down. Leave none alive." The Vorthan ships followed the human vessels into the asteroid belt. It was a field of floating rocks, some as small as houses, others as large as cities. The human ships disappeared among them. Vrek frowned. "Where did they go?" "Find them." The sensors swept through the asteroid belt, but the rocks made it difficult to see clearly. The Vorthan ships spread out, searching. Then the first explosion happened. A Vorthan warship on the edge of the formation suddenly erupted in flame. Alarms screamed across the fleet. Vrek grabbed the edge of his command chair. "What happened? Report." "Unknown, sir. The ship is destroyed. We did not detect any weapons fire." Before Vrek could respond, another explosion. Then another. 3 ships gone in less than a minute. "There!" an officer shouted. On the screen, a small human ship appeared from behind an asteroid. It fired a single missile and then vanished again into the rocks. Vrek's eyes went wide. The humans were not running. They were hunting. On the bridge of the horizon, Captain Jake Morrison watched the battle unfold. His hands were steady on the controls. Beside him, Emma Walsh called out coordinates to the other ships. "Beta Team, target the ship on the left flank. Gamma Team, stay hidden until my signal." Jake smiled grimly. They expected us to fight them in open space. Ship against ship. "That would be stupid," Emma replied without looking up from her screen. Exactly. The plan had been Emma's idea. Humans could not win a direct fight against the Vorthan. Their ships were smaller, weaker, and fewer in number. But humans had been fighting wars against stronger enemies for thousands of years. They had learned that the weak do not win by fighting fair. The asteroid belt was perfect. The Vorthan sensors could not track them through the rocks. Human ships were smaller and faster, able to slip through gaps that the massive Vorthan warships could not follow. And the humans knew something else. Something that would change everything. "Emma, is the solar collector ready?" Jake asked. Emma checked her instruments. "Ready, sir." "On your command." Jake watched the Vorthan ships. They were angry now, firing blindly at asteroids, trying to flush out the human vessels. 6 of their ships were already gone, but they still had 14, and Jake had lost 2 of his own. Now, he said, 200 million miles away, near the sun, a human satellite activated. It had been placed there 3 days ago, rushed into position while the world held its breath. The satellite turned its massive mirrors toward the Vorthan fleet and reflected the raw power of the sun directly at them. The blast of radiation swept through the asteroid belt like an invisible wave. Human ships had been warned. They had shut down their sensors and hidden behind the largest asteroids. But the Vorthan did not know it was coming. Every sensor on every Vorthan ship went blind at once. On the lead ship, Rex stumbled as his screen turned to static. "What is happening? I cannot see anything." "Sensors are down, sir." "All of them?" "The radiation has overloaded our systems." For 3 minutes, the Vorthan fleet was deaf and blind. They could not see the asteroids around them. They could not see each other. And they could not see the human ships rising from their hiding places. Jake Morrison led the attack himself. His ship came up beneath a Vorthan warship and fired everything it had at the engines. The massive ship shuddered and began to drift. Without engines, it crashed slowly into an asteroid the size of a mountain. When the Vorthan sensors finally came back online, 8 more of their ships were destroyed or crippled. Commander Vrek looked at his screen in shock. More than half his fleet was gone. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "Retreat. All ships fall back." The remaining Vorthan vessels turned and ran. The human fleet did not follow. They had won, but they had not won the war. Jake knew the real battle was still coming. On the Eternal Conquest, Warlord Kethson received the report in silence. His advisor stood before him, trembling. 12 ships destroyed, the advisor said. Commander Vrek is returning with only 8 remaining. Kethson said nothing. His face was like stone. The humans used tactics we have never seen before, the advisor continued. They hid among the asteroids. They attacked and disappeared. They used their sun as a weapon. Our soldiers did not know how to respond. Still, Kethzen was silent. The advisor began to sweat. Finally, the warlord spoke. "Bring me everything we have on this species. Their history, their wars, their culture. I want to know how a race so weak learned to fight like this." The advisor bowed and hurried away. Kethzen sat alone in the darkness. For the first time in 200 years, something stirred in his chest. It was not fear. He did not know fear. It was something else. Something he had almost forgotten. Curiosity. These humans were not like the other species he had conquered. They did not fight with honor. They did not meet their enemies face to face. They hid. They tricked. They used everything around them as a weapon. It was dirty. It was dishonorable. And it was effective. Kethzen smiled slowly. Perhaps this would not be as boring as he thought. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread across the world. People danced in the streets. They shouted and cried and held each other. For one night, humanity celebrated. But Jake Morrison did not celebrate. He stood at the window of his quarters and looked at the stars. "We surprised them," Emma said, standing in the doorway. "We should enjoy this moment." "We won a battle," Jake replied. "We hurt them. We embarrassed them. And now they will take us seriously." He turned to face her. "The next time they come, it will be with their full fleet. And Kethzen himself will be leading them." Emma nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We do what humans have always done. We adapt. We survive. And we find a way to win." Outside, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere among them, a fleet was gathering. A warlord was preparing. And the real war was about to begin. Kethzen sat alone in his chambers and read about humanity. The holographic text floated before him, filling the room with pale blue light. He had been reading for 3 days without rest. The humans had a violent history. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years. They had invented weapons that could destroy their own cities. They had split the atom and used it to kill hundreds of thousands of their own kind in a single flash of light. But that was not what interested. Single quotes and dot. What interested him was that they had survived. Every time they faced destruction, they found a way through. Ice ages, plagues that killed half their population, wars that burned their greatest cities to ash. They always came back. They always rebuilt. There was a word in their language that had no equal in the Vorthan tongue: resilience. Kethzen closed the texts and stood. Through his window, he could see his fleet. 200 warships, the largest force the Empire had assembled in 50 years. It was enough to conquer a dozen worlds. And yet, as he looked at it, he felt something strange. Uncertainty. The door opened behind him. His second command, General Throck, entered and bowed. "My lord, we are approaching the human colony world. The one they call Kepler." Kethzen nodded. "I will observe the attack personally. Prepare my shuttle." The human colony on Kepler 442b was small. 50,000 people lived in domed cities on a world that was not quite Earth. The sky was the wrong color, more green than blue. The plants were strange shapes. But the colonists had made it their home. When the Vorthan fleet appeared in orbit, the warning sirens began to scream. Danny Price was 18 years old. He had been born on Earth, but had lived on Kepler since he was 7. He worked in the agricultural dome, helping grow food for the colony. When the sirens started, he was carrying a box of tomatoes. He dropped the box and ran to the window. The sky was full of dark shapes. Vorthan landing craft were descending like a swarm of metal insects. His mother found him there. She grabbed his arm. "Danny, we need to get to the shelter." "Mom, look at how many there are." She pulled him away from the window. "The shelters are deep underground. We will be safe there. But Danny knew they would not be safe. He had seen the news from Earth. He knew what the Vorthen did to colonies that resisted. The landing craft touched down outside the main dome. Vorthen soldiers poured out, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. The colony's small security force met them at the gates. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, the security force was gone. The Vorthen moved through the colony like a flood. They broke into homes and dragged people into the streets. They burned buildings that got in their way. They laughed as humans ran from them. Kethson watched from his shuttle, hovering above the chaos. He saw his soldiers doing what they had done on 100 other worlds. It should have pleased him, but something was different here. The humans were not just running. They were fighting back. Not the soldiers. There were almost no soldiers left. Ordinary people. A man with a metal pipe attacked a Vorthen twice his size. A woman threw a chemical from her laboratory that burned through armor. Children threw rocks. They knew they could not win. They fought anyway. Kethson's eyes found a young human male running toward one of the landing craft. He was carrying something in his arms. A device of some kind. What is that creature doing? Kethson murmured. Danny Price had found the explosive in the emergency supplies. It was meant for mining, for breaking rocks. His hands were shaking as he ran toward the Vorthen ship. Behind him, he could hear his mother screaming his name. He did not stop. A Vorthen soldier saw him and raised his weapon. Danny threw himself to the ground, and the energy blast passed over his head. He rolled, got up, and kept running. The landing craft was full of soldiers preparing for their next assault. They did not see the human boy until he was at the door. Danny looked at them. For one frozen moment, time seemed to stop. Then he smiled. "Surprise," he said. The explosion tore through the landing craft and everything around it. 30 Vorthen soldiers died in an instant. The shockwave knocked down buildings for 100 meters. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of Danny Price. Kethson stared at the place where the human had been. His hands had become fists without him realizing it. Throg's voice came through the communicator. "My lord, we have lost a landing craft. One of the humans sacrificed himself to destroy it." "I saw," Kethson replied quietly. "Shall we increase the attack? Make them pay for this insult?" Kethson was silent for a long moment. He watched as more humans fought and died below. He saw a woman pulling a wounded man to safety while Vorthen soldiers fired at her. He saw an old man standing in front of a group of children, refusing to move even as a soldier aimed a weapon at his chest. "No," Kethson said finally. "Pull back the soldiers. Secure the colony, but stop the killing." There was a pause. "My lord?" "You heard me, Throg. These creatures have earned a moment of mercy." Throg did not argue. He knew better than to question the warlord. That night, Kethson walked through the ruined colony. His guards stayed close, but no human attacked him. They were too busy caring for their wounded and mourning their dead. He stopped beside an old woman who was sitting in the rubble of what had been her home. She looked up at him with eyes that held no fear. "You are not afraid of me," Kethson observed. "I am too old for fear," she replied. "And you are going to kill me anyway. Why should I spend my last moments being afraid?" Kethson studied her. "What is your name?" "Grace," she said. "Grace Miller." "Grace Miller," Kethson repeated. "Tell me something." "The young male who destroyed my ship. Did you know him?" Grace's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "Everyone knew Danny. He was a good boy. He used to bring me vegetables from the farm. Why did he do it? He must have known he would die." Grace wiped her eyes. "Because that ship was full of soldiers who would have killed more of us. He saved lives, maybe hundreds of lives, by ending his own." "Yes," Kethson was quiet. "In the Vorthen Empire, soldiers died for glory, for honor, for the chance to prove their strength. They did not die for others. That was weakness. And yet, looking at the old woman's face, Kevsin did not see weakness. He saw something else. Something powerful. "You are strange creatures," he said finally. "You are weak in body, but there is something in you that I do not understand." Grace looked up at him. "It is called love, monster. We fight for the people we love. We die for them. And that is something your empire will never understand." Kevsin turned and walked away. His guards followed. But her words stayed with him long after he returned to his ship. The next day, Admiral Ben Carter sent a message to the Vorthan fleet. It was short and direct. "Warlord Kevsin, I challenge you to single combat. Choose your champion, and I will choose mine. The winner decides the fate of Earth. If you have any honor, you will accept." On the Eternal Conquest, Kevsin read the message 3 times. His officers waited for him to laugh, to dismiss it, to order the destruction of Earth. Instead, he smiled slowly. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting." He turned to Throck. "Tell the human admiral that I accept his challenge. I will be my own champion. Let us see who they send to face me." On Earth, Jake Morrison was standing in Admiral Carter's office when the reply came. "He accepted," Carter said. "Kevsin himself will fight." Jake nodded. "Then I will fight him." "Jake, you do not have to do this. He has killed thousands. He has never lost." Jake looked out the window at the sky. Somewhere up there, a warlord was waiting. "Someone has to, sir. And I would rather die fighting than watch our world burn." Admiral Carter was silent for a moment. Then he extended his hand. "Good luck, Captain." Jake shook it. "Thank you, sir. But luck has nothing to do with it." He walked out of the office and did not look back. The asteroid had been chosen by both sides. It floated in the empty space between Earth and the Vorthan fleet, a gray rock about 2 miles wide. On its surface, engineers from both species had built a simple arena. A circle of flat stone, 200 feet across. No walls, no cover. Just open ground and the stars above. The entire galaxy was watching. Every species that had access to communication technology had tuned in. Billions of eyes stared at screens on 1,000 different worlds. The Vorthan had conquered many of them. Others lived in fear that they would be next. All of them wanted to see what would happen when a human faced the greatest. Warrior in known space. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the arena. He wore a simple combat suit, black and gray. In his hands, he held a blade made of an alloy that human scientists had developed just for this moment. It was light, strong, and sharp enough to cut through Vorthan armor. At least, that was what they hoped. Emma Walsh stood beside him. Her face was calm, but her eyes were worried. "The backup plan is ready," she said quietly. "If things go wrong, we can extract you in 30 seconds. Jake shook his head. "No extractions. If I lose, let me die on my feet. Humanity needs to see that we do not run, even at the end." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You are not going to lose, Jake." He smiled at her. It was a tired smile, the smile of a man who had made peace with what was coming. "I'm glad you think so." A shuttle landed on the other side of the arena. The door opened, and Kevsin stepped out. Jake had seen images of the warlord, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. Kevsin was nearly 10 feet tall. His body was covered in battle scars, each one a story of some enemy he had killed. His armor was made of the same dark metal as his ship's, and it seemed to absorb the light around him. In his hand, he carried a weapon that was half sword and half axe, with a blade as long as Jake was tall. Kevsin walked to the center of the arena. His eyes found Jake, and he smiled. "So this is the champion of humanity," he said. His voice was deep and rumbling, like thunder in the distance. I expected someone taller. Jake walked forward to meet him. He had to look up to see the warlord's face. Size is not everything. Kethzin laughed. It was not a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who was genuinely amused. No, it is not. I have learned that much from your people. He looked Jake up and down. You fought well in the asteroid belt. Your tactics were clever. Dishonorable, but clever. We do what we have to do to survive. Yes, Kethzin nodded slowly. You do. That is what makes you interesting. He raised his weapon. But survival will not help you here. This is single combat. Strength against strength. And in that contest, you cannot win. Jake raised his own blade. Then why did you accept the challenge? Kethzin's eyes grew thoughtful. Because I wanted to understand. I have conquered 53 species, human. Not one of them fought like you do. Not one of them would have challenged me like this. I wanted to see what kind of creature would face certain death and still stand tall. He shifted into a fighting stance. Now, I will have my answer. Let us begin. The fight started fast. Kethzin moved like lightning despite his size. His first swing would have cut Jake in half if it had landed. But Jake was faster. He ducked under the blade and rolled to the side. Kethzin turned and swung again. Jake blocked the blow, but the force of it sent him sliding backward across the stone. His arms felt like they were on fire. Good reflexes, Kethzin said. But you cannot block me forever. He attacked again, a series of strikes so fast that Jake could barely see them. One caught Jake's shoulder and sent him spinning. Blood sprayed across the stone. Jake hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his body. He heard Emma's voice in his earpiece, calling his name. He heard the gasps from the watching crowds on 100 worlds. Kethzin stood over him. Stay down, human. You have fought well. There is no shame in accepting defeat. Jake coughed. Blood ran from his mouth. Every part of him hurt. He thought about staying down. It would be so easy. Just close his eyes and let it end. But then he thought about Earth, about the children who were watching this fight, hoping for a miracle. About Danny Price, who had given his life to destroy one ship. About Emma, who was waiting for him to come home. He thought about his father, who had told him something long ago. The measure of a man is not whether he falls. It is whether he gets back up. Jake pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. He stood, swaying, bleeding, but standing. Kethzin stared at him. Why do you rise? You cannot win. Your body is broken. One more blow and you will die. Jake spat blood onto the stone. You asked me why I fight. You wanted to understand humans. Let me tell you something, Kethzin. We do not fight because we think we will win. We fight because some things are worth dying for. He raised his blade again. His arms were shaking. My world, my people, the children who are watching this moment, hoping that someone will protect them. They are worth dying for. And as long as I can stand, I will fight for them. Kethzin was silent. Something changed in his eyes. The amusement was gone. In its place was something else. Something that looked almost like respect. You are not just brave, he said slowly. You are something more. Something we Vorthan have forgotten how to be. What is that? Selfless. Kethzin lowered his weapon slightly. We fight for glory. For power, for ourselves. But you fight for others. You would die for creatures who will never know your name. Jake did not lower his blade. That is what it means to be human. For a long moment, the two warriors stood facing each other. The galaxy held its breath. Then Kethzin raised his weapon and attacked, but he was slower than before. Jake saw the opening and took it. He threw himself forward, inside the arc of the warlord's swing, and drove his blade upward. The human alloy punched through a gap in the Vorthan armor. It sank deep into Kethsen's chest. Kethsen stumbled backward. He looked down at the blade in his body, then up at Jake. His expression was not angry. It was not surprised. It was peaceful. "Well done, human," he whispered. He fell to his knees. Blood the color of dark copper pooled beneath him. Jake stood over him, breathing hard. "I did not think that would work." Kethsen laughed, and more blood came from his mouth. "Neither did I." He looked up at the stars. "I have fought for 200 years. I have killed more enemies than I can count. And I have never felt what I feel now." "What is that?" "Peace." Kethsen's eyes found Jake's. "You have shown me something today, human. You have shown me that there is more to strength than muscle and weapons. There is strength in sacrifice, in love, in standing for something greater than yourself." He reached up and grabbed Jake's arm. His grip was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Go home, human. Take care of your people. And when my soldiers ask how I died, tell them the truth. Tell them I was defeated by a creature who fought not for glory, but for love. Tell them that humanity is worthy of survival." His hand fell. His eyes closed. Warlord Kethsen, who had never lost a battle in 200 years, died on a cold asteroid in the middle of space. And the last expression on his face was a smile. Jake stood alone in the arena. The silence was complete. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned disbelief. Then, on Earth, someone began to cheer. The sound spread like fire, from city to city, continent to continent. Within minutes, the whole planet was roaring. Jake did not hear it. He was still looking at Kethsen's body, at the greatest warrior the galaxy had ever known, brought down by a single human who refused to stay down. Emma's voice came through his earpiece. Jake, you did it. You won." Jake finally looked up. The stars seemed brighter than before. "No," he said quietly. "Humanity won." And somewhere in the darkness, on Vorthan ships and conquered worlds, beings who had lived in fear for centuries began to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The news of Kethsen's death spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under Vorthan rule for generations looked up from their work and heard the impossible. The warlord was dead, killed by a human, a creature from a species that had been mocked as weak and primitive. Nothing would ever be the same. On the Eternal Conquest, General Throck stood on the bridge and watched the chaos unfold. Officers shouted at each other. Communications came flooding in from across the fleet. Some demanded revenge. Others called for retreat. A few were already talking about surrender. Throck raised his hand and the bridge went silent. Kethsen accepted this challenge willingly, he said. He knew the risk, and he chose to honor his word. He looked at the officers around him. "We will honor it too. The battle is over. We will return home." One of the younger officers stepped forward. His eyes were full of anger. "We should burn their world to ash. We have 200 ships. They cannot stop us." Throck turned to face him. "And what would that prove? That we are afraid of them? That we can only win when we break our promises?" He shook his head slowly. "Kethsen died with honor. If we destroy the humans now, we spit on his memory." The young officer opened his mouth to argue, but something in Throck's eyes stopped him. "The fleet returns home," Throck repeated. "That is my order. Anyone who disobeys can join Kethsen in the void." The fleet turned and left Earth's solar system. They did not look back, but the retreat was only the beginning of the Vorthan Empire's troubles. Kethsen had held the Empire together through fear and respect. Without him, old rivalries and ambitions came rushing to the surface. Within weeks, the Empire had split into factions. Civil war erupted across their territory. On worlds that the Vorthon had conquered, the oppressed species saw their chance. They had watched the duel. They had seen a creature smaller and weaker than their masters stand against the greatest warrior in the galaxy. If a human could do that, maybe they could fight too. Rebellions broke out everywhere. On the ice world of Kethis Prime, the native species rose up and drove out their Vorthon occupiers. On the jungle moon of Vexel, a guerrilla army formed almost overnight. On a dozen other worlds, the same story played out. The galaxy was changing. On Earth, Jake Morrison became more famous than any human in history. His face was on every screen. His name was spoken with reverence on worlds he had never heard of. Leaders and diplomats came from across the stars just to meet him. He hated it. 3 months after the duel, Emma Walsh found him sitting alone in a bar in Seattle. It was a small place, quiet and dark. Jake was staring at a glass of whiskey that he had not touched. She sat down across from him. "I have been looking for you for 2 days. I did not want to be found." Emma studied his face. He looked tired. More than tired. He looked lost. "The president wants to give you another medal," she said. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have enough medals. What I do not have is peace." "What do you mean?" Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I killed him, Emma. Kethson. I put my blade in his chest and watched him die." He finally looked at her. "Do you know what his last words were?" "He thanked me. He said I showed him something he had forgotten. And then he died smiling." Emma did not know what to say. "Everyone calls me a hero," Jake continued. "But I do not feel like one. I feel like a man who killed someone who was trying to understand us. Someone who might have been able to change his people. Jake." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "You did what you had to do. You saved our world. You saved billions of lives. I know." Jake looked down at her hand on his. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the city went about its business, unaware that the hero of humanity was suffering in a small bar downtown. Finally, Emma spoke. "Do you remember what you told Kethson? About why humans fight?" "I remember. You said we fight because some things are worth dying for. You did not fight for glory or fame. You fought for the children who were watching, for the people who could not fight for themselves." She squeezed his hand. "That is what makes you a hero, Jake, not the killing. The reason behind it." Jake was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Maybe you are right," he said. "Maybe." Admiral Ben Carter called a meeting of the new Galactic Council 6 months after the duel. Representatives from 18 species gathered on Earth, in a building that had been constructed just for this purpose. Many of them had been Vorthon slaves until recently. All of them looked at the human delegates with something close to wonder. Carter stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled representatives. "We are here because something remarkable has happened. Not just the defeat of Kethson, though that was remarkable enough. We are here because the galaxy has woken up. For too long, we have all lived in fear. Fear of the Vorthon. Fear of each other. Fear of standing up for what is right." He paused and let his words sink in. "That fear is over. The Vorthon Empire is crumbling. Their fleets are fighting each other instead of conquering new worlds. And all across the galaxy, species that were once slaves are now free." He smiled. All because one man refused to stay down. The representatives applauded. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Carter raised his hand for silence. "But we cannot rest on this victory. The galaxy is in chaos. Millions of beings need help. Food, medicine, protection. And there are still Vorthon factions that would love to see us destroyed." He looked at each representative in turn. That is why we must stand together. Not as separate species fighting for our own survival, but as a true alliance, united, strong, ready to face whatever comes next. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Alliance was born. In the months that followed, Earth became the center of something new. Ships from 100 worlds landed on the blue planet. Alien diplomats walked the streets of human cities. Human scientists worked alongside beings who had been flying through space when humans were still living in caves. Emma Walsh was promoted to captain and given command of a new ship, the Unity. It was built with technology from 6 different species, and its mission was to help worlds recover from Vorthan rule. She spent her days flying from star to star, delivering food and supplies, helping rebuild what had been destroyed. Jake Morrison eventually found his peace. He did not stay in the spotlight. Instead, he went back to Kepler 442b, to the colony that had suffered so much in the war. He helped them rebuild. He worked in the fields where Danny Price had once grown tomatoes. And slowly, day by day, he learned to live with what he had done. One evening, he was walking through the colony when he found Grace Miller sitting on the same pile of rubble where he had first heard about Danny. She was older now, and tired, but her eyes were still sharp. "Captain Morrison," she said. "Or should I call you the savior of humanity?" Jake sat down beside her. "Just, Jake is fine." Grace smiled. "I heard what you did. The duel. Kefzin." She looked at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "I never thought I would live to see such a thing." "Neither did I," Jake admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then, Grace spoke again. "Danny would have been proud of you. He believed that one person could make a difference." He was right. Jake thought about Danny, about the boy who had run toward a Vorthan ship with a bomb in his arms, about the courage it must have taken, about all the people who were alive because of what he did. "He was a hero," Jake said. "The real hero." Grace nodded. "Yes, he was. But so are you." Jake did not argue. He just looked up at the stars and thought about all the beings looking back. Humans, Vorthan, species he had never heard of. All of them sharing the same galaxy. All of them trying to find their way. The aliens who had once laughed at humanity now spoke the name of Earth with respect. The species that had been called soft and weak had shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. Not the strength of claws or armor or weapons. The strength of compassion, of sacrifice, of refusing to give up, even when all hope seemed lost. And as Jake sat there in the fading light, watching the stars come out one by one, he knew that humanity's journey among them had only just begun. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in a very long time, that was a good thing.